Hey friends, it's Pastor Stephanie here. Happy Monday. I hope you're having a great day. I am joining you from my garage this morning. In fact, you can probably hear the buzz of the fluorescent lights that are over my head, and you can see all the cool yard stuff that my husband uses to make our yard look beautiful. And I was excited to join you from my garage today because I was remembering a time in my life when I used this shovel to go and dig a garden. Now let me tell you about this because this is a funny story. You'll appreciate this. So I, about probably 15 years ago, it was before we had kids, Phil and I lived in Duncan, Oklahoma. And we lived in this cute little house, and we were excited about kind of making it our own. And there was one very rainy afternoon, and we were kind of bored, and we were sitting around the house, and I looked at Phil, and I said, Phil, I'm going to go dig a flower garden. And he looked at me, and he said, are you sure that you want to go dig a flower garden? Have you seen what it's doing outside? And I was like, oh, a little rain has never bothered me. I can just go out and I'll just dig, and it means the ground will be soft, so that'll be good. And he said, are you sure? You sure you want to do that? And I said, yes, I'm going to go dig a flower garden, and nothing is going to stop me from using this shovel to dig a flower garden. And Phil looked at me and smiled, and he said, okay, let me know how that goes for you. So I went outside, I put on my raincoat, I put on my rain boots, I grabbed this shovel, and I went to our backyard and I began to dig in the rain. Now, many of you will think, who know me, that think this is really odd because I don't like to be out when any water is falling from the sky because it messes with your hair and your makeup, and I don't love that. But that day, I was going to do it. I was going to do what I wanted, and nothing was going to stop me. And I remember being absolutely miserable while I was out digging that garden, but I was not going to stop. In fact, I remember Phil opening the back door and checking on me and saying, hey, how you doing out there? You doing okay? And I was like, yes, I'm doing just fine digging my flower garden, and nobody's going to stop me. He said, okay, have fun with that. And he went back inside. And I proceeded to dig up about half of what I wanted to be the flower garden before I finally gave up. I came inside, I was soaking wet, the shovel was covered in nasty mud, and it got all caked on to the shovel. And I came in after I got cleaned up, and I went and I sat down on the couch beside Phil, and I said, you were right. I shouldn't have gone out today. Today was not the right day to dig a flower garden. And Phil, in his kindness, looked at me and he said, that's okay. I knew you'd come around at some point. Well, friends, I was thinking about this idea of having to have things our own way. I remember being so fixed on what I wanted that nobody was going to talk me out of it. And it reminded me of Judas. As we move into Holy Week and we're thinking about the events that took place leading up to the crucifixion and then ultimately the resurrection, it made me think a lot about Judas. Because Judas was someone who wanted things his own way. He had decided that he knew what was best and that he wanted Jesus to do what Judas wanted him to do. And so he was going to force Jesus' hand. In fact, he went to the chief priests and he offered to turn Jesus in for 30 pieces of silver. All because he wanted his own way and nothing was going to stop him. So friends, as we look at that, I think there's a lot that we can learn about who God wants us to be. As we talked about at the beginning of our sermon series that we are currently in called Flawed, at the very beginning, we talked about the fact that Lent is a time when we evaluate who we are. It's a time when we come face to face with the one that we were created to reflect. A lot of times we look at Lent and we think we're supposed to hold up a mirror in front of ourselves so that we can see all the things we need to change about ourselves, but that's not what Lent is at all. Lent is all about coming face to face with God because He is the one that we were created to reflect. And when we do that, when we come face to face with Him, what we realize is that either we're going to choose our will or we have to choose His will. And we really do have to make a choice because God will respect our free will. He will let us choose. He will let us choose if we want things our own way or if we are going to align our will with His. Now, as you think about this, I want you to think about one more thing. A lot of times when we come face to face with Jesus and we come face to face with whether or not we are going to surrender to Him or we're going to have things our own way, one of the things that we have to realize is that a lot of times when we want to grab onto our own way of doing things, it's because we're trying to avoid pain and suffering. It's because we're trying to avoid having to go through something we don't want to go through. Judas was trying to avoid having to be the second best all the time. He wanted Jesus to be the ruler and the commander and to overcome the Roman officers. He was tired of playing second fiddle. Sometimes we are just trying to avoid those things that we don't want to deal with. And a lot of times for us, it's pain and suffering. Right now, in the midst of this crisis that we are in the midst of the pandemic that we are in, so many of us want relief. We want to be able to avoid the pain and suffering that we're having to go through, the isolation that we're having to go through. But let me offer you a different way of looking at this today. Friends, pain and suffering isn't always bad. When you think about going to the dentist, if you have a cavity, or even if you are in need of a root canal and that cavity has worked its way into the root, that procedure has the potential of being very painful, but it's for good. You need to go through the pain in order to be healed. Or if you think about your joints, if a joint is knocked out of socket, when the doctor has to put that joint back into place, it is extremely painful. But if you don't go through the pain, then you'll lose all capability of being able to use your limb. Sometimes pain and suffering is a good thing. And so if we try with all our hearts to avoid it, then we are avoiding that which we need to go through in order to grow into the people that God has created us to be. We are having to walk through some pain, some suffering, some trials right now, some things that are very difficult for all of us. But friends, I want you to know that God has a purpose in this suffering. And the only way for us to understand and fully reach that purpose is to come face to face with Him and surrender our will to His. We have to be able to say, not my will, but your will be done. Friends, that's good news for us today. You need to realize that you don't know everything. We're not going to know everything. We're not going to know how everything is going to work out. But when you come face to face with the one who is all-knowing, you can trust Him. You can trust Him to carry you through. And He will do that. And when you surrender your will to His, you will find true life. Time to put the shovels up. Time to surrender our will to His. Time to quit trying to have everything our own way and to trust the one whose way is perfect. Friends, I'm so glad to get to see you again on this Monday, this very special Monday of Holy Week, and I hope that you will have a very, very blessed day. I continue to pray for you.